beginnings were not casual. I will begin in '68, a year that has some significance for me and our congregation. And I'll speak alone to the seedings of the PAB, a word that was not even in our vocabulary at the time. I might also refer to this time as the time of some featherings of the idea, barely there in our consciousness, but deeply there in our subconscious. So it came quickly aborning into our experience. It seems upon remembering that time that deep in our souls were always the leanings toward social justice. We had no idea that these breathings and these featherings and these beginnings would become institutionalized in the very next chapter, which decreed that we begin a portfolio advisory board.
When I went back and read the enactment from 1974, one of the things that amused me, besides saying we needed to set up a committee and we had to have it as a way to look at how we do our investments and have some criteria, and said, what is the time frame? And had this little phrase, as soon as possible. And I thought that's been so typical of Adrian. I mean, why didn't we do it yesterday? And so as soon as possible meant that we had our first meeting, I think it was about January 19th in 1975, and that was an educational meeting, and it was not only the PAB members, but other people in the finance and other offices. And by the time we met in June, we'd already gone to shareholder meetings, we had already done proxies, we had already started to collaborate with some of the Protestant groups in ICCR, and we'd already explored ways of doing congregational education.
When I got involved with McDonald's, I learned an awful lot about their plight. And the group that I got connected with was the Coalition of Immokalee Workers, and their base is in Florida. We got McDonald's through dialogue to raise their pay a penny a pound. So it raised their wages like $32 a day.
And so with shareholder advocacy, overall, it's how we as sisters, we as citizens of this country have a voice at the table.
I was actively involved in discussions with Kmart. So I was able to actually go to the Kmart headquarters and have discussions with the management about ensuring that the products that they were selling, that there was a good representation from minority-owned businesses. So I always felt that that was important. We've had some successes. When I began on PAB, apartheid was rampant in South Africa.
This was a very serious time as far as some of the countries in the world. And one in particular was South Africa. A number of groups had already begun to look at where they were investing their monies. And they had actually come up with the Sullivan Principles. And the whole idea of the Sullivan Principles would be that anyone who invested monies there had to absolutely ensure that Black people were employed in these companies. We had a press conference, and we also cut up our shell cards and made sure that we publicized this so that others would hopefully follow our example. Oftentimes, we know so little about foreign countries, and we know so little about the history of the country and what's going on in that country. And that if somebody has that information, that people who come to shareholder meetings are on the whole very interested in learning and in knowing what they vote for and why they're voting.
Another way that we voice ourselves is by proxy voting. So proxy voting is It's an action that sometimes I don't think it gets much of the recognition that it really should, because that's really a right that every shareholder has to voice whether they agree or not agree with whatever the corporation is asking from the shareholders. We strive to build that beloved community and to embody it and to be about it. And so lay members for us are community.
My ministry was education. The work on the Portfolio Advisory Board was totally something that we did after hours or on the weekends. It was the person who was the committee chair who made sure that everything worked. Then Laura Mack came into the program as working in an actual office.
When I started, there was sisters were all running the show, and one sister was elected to leadership. She left, and that position was open, which they filled with 2 co-coordinators, they called them at that time, for each part of the work. Now, as they began to leave, I went on to assume that position because there was no sisters available, for various reasons. I kind of accidentally fell into work that I loved. Now that we've transitioned from all the founding members, we need new board members. We need new membership on the board. We need people who can understand PAB and are passionate about it. The board no longer had to be just Adrian Dominican Sisters. It could now be former Adrian Dominicans. It could be associates and lay staff.
We all have the passion and compassion for the work that we are doing and the people that are being served by the work.
Partnerships through the very beginning of our work with PAB have been essential. We couldn't be where we are without our partners. Together we come to a place of strategizing and finding pathways for change to happen. One example is ICCR, or the Interfaith Center for Corporate Responsibility.
Adrian Dominicans are one of our oldest members and very, very active for decades. It's amazing, as we went back and looked at the history of filing and dialogue by the Adrian Dominicans, that they've been involved in virtually every area of corporate accountability and corporate responsibility that we've taken as a coalition. So it's a very long list of active advocacy by the Adrian Dominican Sisters, very much in line, working lockstep and collaboratively with ICCR members on so many critical issues. The sisters have had an impact with individual companies, but they've also been in the vanguard of investors who have really been driving this conversation that investors don't just care about short-term profits regardless of consequences, but are much more concerned about the broader impacts that corporate practices can have on people and planet.
In the early years, we were doing a lot of corporate responsibility. And then, we were getting a little frustrated because we saw that this was going to be a long-term effort. And so that's when we started talking about, what about using some of our money alternatively? This was our way of saying there's another way to use your investment money besides Wall Street. It became very satisfying to be in that work, and of course it became a life's work for me.
I don't think we'd be here today if we had not met Sister Corinne Floric and gotten the initial support from the Adrian Dominican Sisters. Not only your direct support, but then also connecting us to a broader network of faith-based organizations all across North America. So if we had not gotten that early support and ongoing support, I truly don't believe that SELF would be where we're at today.
When you come from Indigenous communities or Indigenous reservations, there are facts and figures out there that less than a half of a percent of all of philanthropy goes to Indigenous-led organizations. So we're an Indigenous-led organization operating within an Indian reservation. And not a lot of philanthropists are looking to invest in communities like ours. And so that's That's why we value and cherish so much these kinds of partnerships and support that we've received, because it's few and far between. I think it's a true testament to what is possible when you focus on the goodness in these relationships, and look at what we were able to create together that will have generational impacts.
I hope we can continue to take the risks of doing those new small projects in communities, because we still have communities that don't get funding, don't have access to capital. And I hope we continue to stay risky. Take the risks. Go where you've never been. Do things you've never done, because that's really how you grow.
When I think of building on legacy, I think about and feel the presence of our foremothers. Their vision, their courage, their wisdom. They were so aware of the importance of this work. And to think that this was 50 years ago, that they had that insight, is pure grace.
I'd like to share with the Adrian Dominicans and all those that I worked with over the years, whether it was, the board, the team, the staff, proxy voters, everyone on campus. I'm very grateful and very much honored to have been a part of the ministry over those years. So
We're so grateful for the partnership of the PAB and the Adrian Dominican Sisters. There's a lot of eager to work together going forward on so many of these critical issues.
And so I think that that's the legacy, to be able to make loans, to be able to help organizations. That is a great piece of the legacy. But I think that what we will always have to keep in front of us is the commitment that the sisters made.